All right, we're going to take a look at factoring. There's a lot of different examples for factoring. I'm not going to do every single one of these, but I'm going to do a few of these to get you guys started. So when you factor, factoring means to divide. Okay, that's the operation that we're performing. So right here, we are factoring these two terms. So the very first thing you want to do is look at the numbers. Now notice it's a 7 and a 7. Is there anything that goes into 7 and into 7 evenly? Well, 7 does. 7 goes into 7 and 7 goes into 7 evenly. So when we factor, we're looking for what's called the greatest common factor. So 7 is the biggest number that goes into both of these numbers evenly. So the greatest common factor here is 7. So we're going to write that down. Now, since the letters are different, we can't do anything with those. Okay? So we're going to apply parentheses, and now we're going to divide. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. So we'd have 1x plus 7 divided by 7 is 1. So we'd have 1y. And then we're done. Okay, let's look at number 3. So what's the greatest common factor? So what's the largest number that goes into 8 and 4 evenly? Well, we know that 2 goes into both of them evenly, but we want the greatest common factor. So the greatest number that goes into 8 and 4 evenly is 4. So we write that down. Notice the letters are different, so we're going to do nothing with those letters. Those are going to stay the same. So let's start dividing. 8 divided by 4, 2. Bring down the x, bring down the minus. 4 divided by 4 is 1. And there we have it. There is your answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. Okay, so now in this case, the number is 3 and this number would be 1. So there's really nothing we can factor out of a 3 and a 1. But notice we have an x and an x. So we can factor out 1x out of both of them. Since they have that letter in common, we're going to put that letter out front. Okay, and now we're going to divide. So there's nothing to be done with the 3, so that's going to come down. X divided by x. So x divided by x is 1. Sorry, I'm off the screen there. Anything divided by itself is always going to give you 1. So when you divide here, you're going to get a 1. So 3 times 1 is just 3. Okay? Nothing to do with the A, nothing to do with the W. X divided by x is 1. So if you get a 1, you don't have to write that down. I wrote it down here, but you don't have to. Okay? So this is going to be our answer. Notice I took an x out of both terms. Okay, let's look at 7. So notice that these three terms don't have a, it's 4, 1, and 1, so there's nothing to factor out of the numbers, but it has a c in common. Now, since there's a c in common with all three terms, we can factor it out. So 4, c divided by c is 1, plus a, c divided by c is 1, plus b, c divided by c is 1. And that's your answer. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at number 9. So notice we have a d in common in all three. Now this one is d squared. So d squared is actually d times d. Okay, so we actually have two d's here. So when we factor out a d, you're taking away one of these. So here we had two of them. And basically what we did was we divided by 1d and leaving you with 1 left over. Plus 2, d cancels, plus a, d cancels. All right, Let's move along here. Let's look at number 13. Okay, well, you know what? Let's go to 11. Here we have an x in common. There's 2 here, and there's 2 here, which means I can take 2 x's from both of these terms. So remember what I said. Anything divided by itself is 1. So that's going to become 1. Y comes down, and that's going to become 1. And we don't have to write 1. Okay, let's go on to 13. Here we have 2 u's, 3 u's, and 4 u's. Notice we're not going to get a greatest common factor with the numbers. So the most u's we can take is 2, because this only has 2. So you can't take more than that. Okay, so we're going to take 2 u's from each one. So this divided by this time you do have to write the 1, because that's the only thing there. 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, bring down the 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. This is u times u times u. And if I take away 2 u's, that's what I'm factoring out, that's what I'm dividing by, then 2 of those u's cancel out, leaving you with 1 u. Plus 17. Taking 2 from 4, that's going to leave us 2 u's left over. I hope you're getting the idea here. Okay, let's move on to number 15. Now notice these 3 terms have 2 letters in common. So let's start off with the a's. Here we have 3, here we have 2, and here we have 1. So the most a's we can take is 1, because this one only has 1, a to the first power. Okay, this one has 3 y's, 2 y's, and 1 y. The most y's we can take from each one is 1 y. You always want to go with the smallest exponent, okay? So we're going to take an a and a y. So let's do our a's first. So 3 minus 1 leaves us with 2 left over. Okay, I'm going to leave a space here. 2 took away 1, leaving us with 1 left over. A divided by A divided by A is always 1. I'm going to go ahead and put the 1 here for now, just in case we need it. Now let's do the y's. So 3 minus 1 is 2 left over. 2 minus 1 leaves us with 1 left over. And y divided by y is again 1. So that is going to be our answer. I hope you guys are getting the hang of this. All right, let's turn it over here. Let's do some more examples. Getting to be a little bit more complex. All right, so let's look at number 17 here. So here we have numbers that we can factor out a greatest common factor. So let's see, 2 goes into all 3 of them evenly. Is there a bigger number? 3, no. 4, 4, 4. Yes, 4 goes into all of them evenly. So 4 is even bigger. 5, no. 6, no. 7, 8. 8 goes in here. 8, no. 9, 10. It looks like 4 is going to be our greatest common factor. Okay, now let's look at our letters. Here we have 2 A's, 3 A's, and 4 A's. So it looks like the most I can take out is 2. 3 X's, 2 X's, and 1 X. So the most X's I can take out is 1. All right, let's do the division. 16 divided by 4, 4. 2 minus 2, 0. So that a squared divided by a squared is 1, which we do not need to write, remember. 3 minus 1 is 2. Okay, plus 20 divided by 4 is 5. 3 minus 2 gives us 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. Okay, minus 12 divided by 4 is 3. 4 minus 2 is 2. And x divided by x is 1. So we could clean this up a little bit by getting rid of that 1 right here. But other than that, that would be your answer. Okay, let's look at 19. Remember that a parentheses represents a group. Okay, so what we have here is we have two terms where the groups are the same. Since the groups are the same, we're going to factor out the group. So we're going to factor out b minus 7. So b minus 7 divided by b minus 7 is 1. Remember what I told you. Anything divided by itself is always 1. So that's going to cancel, leaving us with a. Bring down the plus, bring down the d. b minus 7 divided by b minus 7 is 1. And that would be your answer. All right. Here we have a common group. We would factor out the x minus 5. And that would leave us a minus b. Here we'd factor out the x minus y. And that would leave us with a plus, and then we would need that 1. That's the only time you got to write the 1, is if it cancels and there's nothing left to write down. That's when you need to write that 1. Okay, we're getting a little bit more complicated now. I hope that you are with me still. All right, so here we have to group these so that we have two groups with common letters. So notice this group has an x in common, right? So we're going to group those two together. These two have an s in common, so we'll go ahead and group those together. So we're going to do each one separately. So if I covered up this one, we would factor out an x, leaving us with v plus z. Then we would factor out an s, leaving us with a v plus z. Now we're back to what we just learned, where we factor out a common group. So the v plus the z gets factored out, leaving us with x plus s. And those are our factors. All right, I'm going to do as many of these as I can before time is up. Now let's take a look at this one. So this one, if we group them, okay, here we could factor out a 3 out of both of these terms, but not a w. So 2w minus 5. Now this one's a little tricky because it's a minus. So when you factor out a common factor here, you want to factor out, if it's a minus in front, you want to bring that minus down on that factor. So we're going to factor out a 7 and an h. So a 7 and an h. Okay, so dividing, negative 14 divided by negative 7 is 2. H divided by h is 1. Bring down the w. 35 divided by negative 7 is negative 5. And h divided by h is 1. And then we'll factor out our common group. And I hope that this makes sense to you. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work.